All right, well, on the eve of Parliament's return, let's bring in our political panel. Labor MP Josh Burns was at that caucus meeting. Liberal MP James Stephens, of course, was not, but I'm pleased to say both are with us here in the studio now. Welcome back, both. And look, why don't we start with Australia-China relations, and I'll go to you first. Josh Burns, so much has been said about the reset in trade and commerce ties. Then we have this life sentence slapped on Young Hen Jung today. Is cooperate where we can, disagree where we must, a strong enough foreign policy position to deal with these sort of cases?
Well, first of all, this has been a very difficult day for Mr Hen Jung's family, and we stand in solidarity with them. And I think that principle is one where obviously this is a difficult thing to manage, that this is a country where the relationship is really important to Australia, but obviously it's a complicated one. And I think what choice do we have but to state our position, state it clearly. The Foreign Minister has articulated that extremely firmly today. And we, on behalf of our country, express our point of view. Obviously, there are still avenues available to him, and we'll provide every bit of consular support that is going to be available. But it's a difficult day, and we will express our viewpoint directly to the Chinese authorities.
Yeah, difficult day. Would you agree with Josh in that sense, James? I mean, what more reasonably can be done? I take it Australia wouldn't pursue things like reverse coercion where it doesn't sell iron ore and the like to China. So is it fully contained to, the space that it's in at the moment?
Look, my understanding is the ambassador's just visited the foreign minister, and perhaps we'll get a little bit of an understanding of what he had to say for himself when he met with Minister Wong, and
I think it was the departmental secretary.
Apologies, yes. So the representative of the Chinese government. So that will be interesting to know. And look, I agree with what Josh has said, what Penny Wong and what Shadow Foreign Minister Simon Birmingham have said. We all hold the same abhorrence towards what has happened here. And no, I don't think that you match these things and couple them to other elements of our relationship and our trade and economic interests, etc. But we absolutely stand by our values and standing up for and protecting the interests of Australian citizens, and certainly speaking up for them like we are in this case.
I'm sure that's a view that's widely held across the Parliament and throughout it. Let's move on to something where, again, we might find agreement at the end of the day: Stage 3 tax cuts. Polls show the government's not exactly being punished. That's the early readout, because people seem pleased to get hold of the money that they'll be given on the 1st of July. Josh, wouldn't you expect some sort of bounce greater than is showing up in either internal ALP polling, which has been aired, but other published polls too?
Greg, if you spend every day in this place focusing on the polls, your head will fall off. I think what we have to do is govern in the interest of the people who we're privileged to represent. And when you look at the Stage 3 tax cuts that Scott Morrison left us, there were a lot of people on the lower and middle income who would have missed out on tax cuts. And we made a decision that, given the cost of living pressures that Australians are facing, we want to see people right up and down the income spectrum, literally every single Australian taxpayer, to get a tax cut, because we know how difficult it's been for so many people. Nurses, teachers. I've got a lot of young professionals in Macnamara. They're all going to get a tax cut. So this was about making the right decision, and I'm proud of this decision. I think it's fairer, and I think it means that more people will get a tax cut when they really need it.
All right, Labor's backing itself, both through Josh Burns and others here, James Stephens. You're not yet in Shadow Cabinet, I use the word yet, so you can speak very freely.
Put the moz on him, Greg.
Yeah. You can speak very freely to us. Are you going to support this?
We'll make our decision tomorrow. All the arguments Josh has just made, the Labor Party could have made during the last election and chose not to. So we think it's obviously appalling to say one thing to the people of this country in an election campaign and do the complete opposite afterwards. And now, of course, we see a whole range of other new taxes being entertained and mused about within Labor around capital gains, around superannuation, all the typical things that Labor would love to get their hands on are now potentially on the table. What we now know is that they'll probably only do that after the next election, not before, much like they've done here on Stage 3. So we'll reflect on what we do in the Parliament tomorrow in the party room, but what has happened here is a great betrayal to the people of this country that thought they could trust Anthony Albanese, take him at his word, and they've learned a very important lesson about him and his character.
All right, so is it viable to then come up with some formulation for a coalition policy or a Liberal policy that says you will return to those who were left relatively worse off at the upper ends of the income scales? You'll take that as an election promise?
I think we should definitely look at it. I mean, if this is legislated, then we effectively start with a new blank piece of paper. I mean, we're the party of low tax. We're not going to be going to an election to put taxes up on anyone. I'm very confident of saying that without a party room decision. And if what's being proposed goes through the Parliament, then we'll obviously have to look at that as the new baseline of the income tax rates and regime, and look at what we can afford to do to provide further relief and reduce the tax burden on Australians, which we as a party have in our DNA.
All right. Sounds like they'll be looking there with promises prospective to the passage of Stage 3, Josh Burns. But this is what you're going to have to weather. What James is putting here is potentially moves on cap gains, on neg gearing, on super and the like. This is the downside to flipping policy, breaking a promise, as they say.
I mean, James put a little bit of mayo on what's going on here. What we've made a decision is around, there was a piece of tax legislation that Scott Morrison brought into the Parliament. There's been a whole range of cost of living pressures that Australians have faced, 13 interest rate rises. You know, families are doing it tough. So we want to make sure that we're going to help people in their time of need. So we made a decision to change the policy. Everyone's still getting a tax cut. Every taxpayer is still getting a tax cut. It's not what the Liberal Party's trying to make it out to be. It's about helping people who are facing real cost of living pressures.
And when did the penny drop for you on those real cost of living pressures? Because as you say, the interest rate rises have been going for, you know, what are we saying, about 18 months now, not continuously, but throughout 18 months. Why did the circuit breaker need to be around Christmas time? This decision could have been made on that evidence many months ago.
Well, the Stage 3 tax cuts were only ever meant to be coming into effect at the start of July, at the start of the next financial year. So they haven't been introduced yet. So there was never a situation where the Stage 3 tax cuts had already begun. They hadn't. They'd been legislated, but they hadn't begun. So look, we looked at the set of financial circumstances that Australians face themselves in, and you know, well, let's see what the coalition do. They're going to pass this thing, Greg, because it would be completely insane for them not to. They would be sillier than they look if they did that. They're going to pass this, and they're going to support our policy because it's the right policy. It's going to help more Australians, and it's the fairer thing to do.
All right, last word on that, James. You don't think you're in a position to argue with that proposition, are you? That when all is said and done, sometime this week, you'll be sitting on the same side of the chamber as Josh?
Look, the proposition that Josh has just put is that whatever Labor say in the next campaign, it could all change after the election. And any argument that they want to dress this up as around circumstance have changed means that everything is on the table and nothing they commit to now can be expected to be honoured in the upcoming campaign. So we look forward to a campaign on integrity on the basis that whatever Labor say they're going to do is going to be very different if they get the chance to a second term, and that includes all the other new tax areas that we've just canvassed.
Well, let's talk about one that won't officially be regarded as a tax, but kind of works like one, perhaps, in our carbon emissions budget anyway. James Stephens, I'll start this one with you. It's the Vehicle Efficiency Standard, or Fuel Efficiency Standard. There's a sense in which we've been living on borrowed time in this country. We were always going to get one, weren't we? What do you think of the one the government's put out there as of yesterday?
Yeah, I think they put out 3 scenarios and they've got their preference.
Yeah.
It's been interesting. I don't know, Josh can clear this up, whether the actual modelling behind these is released or not. The last modelling we saw from Chris Bowen was the modelling on his power policy that was going to reduce bills by $275, which he missed by quite a way. So we're happy to participate in a good quality public discussion and consultation across these 3 and be constructive. We haven't determined a position yet. We're interested in the views of stakeholders. Some of those are already being articulated as soon as today. But we're just very wary that we don't want to blindly agree to something that is going to dramatically increase costs on Australians. Josh has just told us about how tough people are doing it. This does have the risk of making it a lot more expensive to buy a vehicle, and we'd be pretty concerned about that, but open-minded to see the evidence that won't be the case.
Well, that's the big question that hangs over the fuel efficiency standard, Josh Burns. Catherine King says the international experience is that these things have no price effect. But how can there not be if the whole motivation is to change buyer behaviour, that is, make the switch to cleaner cars?
Well, because the countries that have fuel efficiency standards get the more fuel-efficient cars sold and sent to those countries. Australia
doesn't mean they're cheaper.
Australia currently sits alongside Russia as one of the major economies of the world that doesn't have fuel efficiency standards. The former government said that fuel efficiency standards would end the weekend. So James isn't from the sort of anti-climate change part of the Liberal Party. He's in the sort of leafy South Australian part of the Liberal Party. But really, this is overdue. The fact that we have no fuel efficient standards in Australia, it means that car companies don't have any requirements or incentives to send the more efficient and the less emission intensive vehicles to Australia. So we're sort of becoming the dumping ground for old makes of cars. We shouldn't be doing that. We should have cleaner, cheaper, more reliable electric vehicles available for Australians to purchase. And that's what this policy is going to deliver.
All right. Look, the parliamentary year is about to begin. We're going to bring to our audience an interview with the Speaker, Milton Dick, shortly. I'll let you in on one of his aspirations for the year, James Stephens. He's going to clamp down harder on unparliamentary behaviour. His resolve is that people will stop
straight to his arm.
Stop accusing each other of lying or voting to protect pedophiles and the like. Your side of politics is promising a year of policy. Are we going to get all these high aspirations fulfilled in 24?
I hope so, and I make a personal commitment towards supporting the Speaker in that endeavour, as I'm sure Josh does as well. And we can absolutely behave better in the Parliament. In all seriousness, I'd love to see the standards improve.
Your resolve? That'd be your resolve. You'd share that very quickly, Josh Burns?
Absolutely. The Speaker is an excellent Speaker, and I think he's doing great work to improve the standards around Parliament. It's a different place to when I joined as a staffer many, many years ago, and the more Parliament modernises and becomes a reflective of Australian workplaces, the better.
All right, we'll all work to lift the tone, and you've both done an admirable job in doing that today. Josh Burns, James Stephens, will get you back, as you know, before too long.